Hi, my name is Virginia Taylor Benninger, and I used the DNRS program to recover from generalized anxiety disorder, panic attacks, PTSD, OCD, and chronic pain. Since my recovery, my life has been absolutely amazing. I'm able to go where I want and do what I want and enjoy all of the things that I love to do, and I just generally feel like I'm thriving again. Some of the passions that I have include traveling, hiking, swimming, skiing, practicing yoga, and gardening. I am just so thankful to the DNRS program for helping me become myself again and for allowing me to be really excited for what the future holds. The most basic definition of neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change itself. And what we see with limbic system disorders is that the brain has experienced some form of trauma that causes it to respond in what we call a maladaptive stress response way. This can be because of physical, environmental, or emotional trauma, or sometimes it can be a combination of all three. So, what's happening here is the brain begins to think that it's constantly responding to threats, even when it's not. And this is what causes a lot of the problems that we see with limbic system disorders. The very good news, however, is that because of neuroplasticity, we can actually work to begin retraining our brains so that the brain no longer responds in this maladapted way. So, when talking about stress, there's actually two kinds. There's one stress, which is called EU stress, which is the stress that motivates us and helps us get things done. And then there's another kind, which is called distress, which is connected to our fight or flight mechanism. If I'm going to describe this, I think a really great way to do so is to talk about the days of the cavemen. So, back in the beginning of time, there's a tiger that's coming to attack you. So what happens in the brain when this threat is being experienced is that the hypothalamus is sending messages to the pituitary gland to release stress hormones to help us either get away from this situation or fight it. These stress hormones include adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine. And so what happens is we all of a sudden get this boost that we need. We have a lot of energy, our hearts are racing, and all of these hormones are actually sending signals to our vital organs to help us deal with this situation. Now, normally, once the threat is no longer there, all of these hormones stop being produced and our body can go back to a state of normalcy. But with limbic system disorders, our bodies or our brains don't realize that the threat isn't there anymore and they continue to operate in this state of fight or flight. So now our bodies are expending all of this energy to produce all of these hormones, which means that other parts of our body, such as our immune system, our detoxification system, and our digestive tracts, are no longer getting the energy that they need. And so they actually stop to function properly. So, what's happening when we are constantly operating in a state of fight or flight is that the neural pathways being used are becoming more and more common. As this happens, the sensory responses that we have get faster and faster as a result. An example I could give is a toboggan being used after a big snow. The very first run that you're going to take is going to be super slow because of all the snow. But as you continue to do more and more runs, that track is going to get faster and faster and faster. And the same thing happens in the brain when we continue to use the same pathways over and over again. So now I want you to take a look at this picture because it represents what's happening or what we put our focus towards when we are stuck in a state of fight or flight. So when this is happening, we focus on three things. We focus on the body, the environment, and time. In this picture, the person running away from the hand, the act of running, that's the focus on the body. because you are actively trying to get away from the threat. In terms of the environment, the hand is representing that threat. It's representing an actual threat or a perceived threat, but it's what's causing you to want to get away from it as soon as you possibly can. And that is the element of time. There is this sense of actual immediacy. I have to get away from this right now. I cannot wait. It has to happen immediately. So when we're focusing on these three things, body, environment, and time, that is an indication that we are stuck in this state of fight or flight. So I'd like to ask how many of you spend most of your day, if not all of your day, focusing on these three things? My guess is probably quite a lot. The good news, though, is that with limbic system rehabilitation, we are going to be able to teach you how to shut off this chronic stress response so that you no longer have to feel this way, so that you no longer spend your day constantly focusing on your body, the environment, or time. Sounds pretty good, right? In healthy individuals, the limbic system serves as a protective gate to analyze and filter incoming stimuli and assigns a level of threat importance. It is known as the feeling and reacting brain. It categorizes information into two distinct categories, threat and no threat. When damaged, the filtering process can become impaired and alter the way that the brain and body interpret, encode, and respond to any sensory or emotional stimuli. The resulting cross-wiring or disorganization of neural circuits establishes involuntary trauma patterns that overactivate threat, protective, and survival mechanisms. It may also result in sensory or emotional distortions. The limbic system is comprised of the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, and the cingulate cortex. It's located in the midbrain, and as I described before, it's known as the feeling and reacting brain. It's responsible for our emotional processing, our protective mechanisms, and it filters all of the stimuli that we receive throughout each day. A great way to describe the functions of the brain is like this. So if you hold up your arm and your wrist are going to function as your brain stem, and they're going to be responsible for your unconscious functions such as breathing and digestion. The palm of your hand is going to be your midbrain or your limbic system, and it's going to be responsible for all of your emotional stimuli and processing. Then, if you take your hand and you fold it over, the fingers are going to represent what's called the prefrontal cortex. And this is the part of the brain that is responsible for executive functioning, and it is usually the part of the brain that directs all the other parts of the brain on a daily basis. What happens with a limbic system impairment is that all of a sudden, the midbrain is now running the show. So everything is being filtered from this emotional and threat-based perspective. This can be very frustrating because you can't process things in a rational way anymore. With limbic system rehabilitation, we're going to teach you how to flip-flop those so that once again, your prefrontal cortex can be acting as the CEO of your brain. The amygdala is involved with the perception of safety. What it does is it receives all the messages from our senses and our organs, and it's also responsible for decoding all of our emotional responses. What happens when the amygdala starts to become more and more sensitive is that it starts to perceive that there is a threat even when there isn't. So for instance, a tree branch brushing up against the window making you jump is an example of your amygdala being overly sensitive. The amygdala is therefore the brain's fear center, and it's what causes us to respond immediately when we are scared or threatened. The amygdala takes information from our external environment and it categorizes it as either threatening or non-threatening. This is where physical or emotional trauma can come into play Because if the amygdala is assessing that there is a threat, your body is going to continuously respond to that threat every time you're experiencing it.